Hey, Redcasters, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos. Go Big Red.
I just think right when we put the team together and as we got to know them really in our preparation for the foreign trip to Spain, it just was a team that came to work every day and they competed every day. You know, what that means, what that equates to, you don't know. But, you know, they just came in with a professional type mindset. And when you have a group like that, that certainly makes our job a lot easier and a hell of a lot more enjoyable.
Welcome to the Go Big Redcast, the Husker Fan Sports Show.
Welcome to the Go Big Redcast. I'm your host, David Gaspers, and I'm with Honky.
For years, NU's been labeled a women's sports school only, and while Amy Williams and the team finished number 2 last week, the men are starting to get a little bit of momentum too. Coach Hoiberg today, co-coach of the year in the Big Ten. Coach Bolt's team's in the top 5 in RPI, and wrestling finished ahead of Blue Blood Iowa in the Big Ten wrestling finals last weekend. So go Big Red. The guys are coming around too.
Absolutely. Highly successful weekend for certain. Also with Boomer.
Well, I'd just like to welcome everyone to the Go Big Redcast, Terry Saban's favorite podcast, because we're certainly not in this for the money.
That's very true. Maybe we'll touch on Nick Saban and his wife and NIL at the end of the show when we talk some Husker football. But also with Redcast Rob, fresh off of his trip to Vegas to see 311 on 311.
Yeah, although real quick, I mean, what does Nick Saban's wife look like that I might be wanting to touch on her? Huh? Well, you said we'd be touching on Nick Saban's wife later or something.
That is offensive to Miss Terry.
That's right.
Okay. Well, after 2 nights of
Clean show, Rob.
Shows in
Take that back to
311.
Vegas.
After 2 nights of 311 shows in Las Vegas, running into one of the fellow members of our upcoming golf trip, Dave, out there, Ian.
Nice.
Ran into him out there and got a picture and sent it off to Skip. And then it's the first time he and I had actually met in person. Got myself a tattoo at the Punk Rock Museum. And now I'm just trying to figure out what idiot scheduled a show right in the middle of a Husker baseball game that I'm trying to watch. So if I don't seem super involved right now, it's because I actually care about Husker sports.
The saying, Rob, is that what stays in Vegas, what happens in Vegas should stay in Vegas.
Well, are you trying to tell me? Are you telling me to go back to Vegas? Are you trying to tell me to go back to Vegas?
That's what I'm saying.
Well, I mean, the rooms were not that expensive. So,
well, Rob, keep
see you guys. Have a good night.
Yeah, keep us up to date, Rob, with the score here as you're watching the 9th inning. So I know we're up 8-6, I think, against Wichita State.
6. That's right. Well, should be another fun show, guys. We're enjoying this off season of football by being hardcore Nebraska basketball fans. And we can talk a little bit about the women's and the men's, obviously. And we'll touch on a little baseball, especially after hopefully we have a victory here midweek game versus Wichita State, and then wrap it up with a little football talk. But let's dive right into some Neebrasketball. All right, Honk. Well, the Husker men took care of business early Sunday morning with the time change. Had to feel like 8 a.m. practically for them, but in Ann Arbor, they took care of business versus a floundering last place Michigan team. Juwan Howard's group not looking good. Nebraska wins 85-70. Casey had 23 at half, and for a moment looked like he might start to challenge our all-time single game scoring record, but he cooled off. Another great game though, and really wasn't in doubt all that much. I'd be happy with that performance, right?
Yeah, absolutely. They did what they needed to do. We needed to finish the season off with the win. We finished up 12-8 in conference, 4 above 500. We finished 3rd in conference, so we get the double bye, and we took care of a team on the road. And so there's a lot of metrics, and we're going to talk a little bit about net rankings here in a little bit, some of the metrics. Yeah. But I think they knocked off a lot of the metrics that we've been saying all along that they need to do, and they needed to win that game, and they took care of it in convincing fashion. So on Michigan Senior Day, so I'm ecstatic with that. And to your point, Dave, I mean, those guys, 11 a.m. start, after losing an hour the night before, that's an early game. But think a lot of Husker fans had two TVs going on at that moment, watching both basketball games, and it was good to see. They played great in both of them, but it was great to see the guys get the W.
Yeah, it probably meant more for the men to get that game, just for making sure there are no questions asked, where the women had already earned their way into the women's tournament, and at best might have moved up one spot, and that might be optimistic. Boomer, so they took care of business there against Michigan, and if you would have said this team was going to finish third in the league beginning of the year, you would have been laughed off of the show. With 7 games to go, we talked about, hey, can they go 4-3, 5-2? They ultimately went 6-1. They've done pretty much everything you wanted them to do at the end of the day.
Yeah, and that was one of the things we talked about. I know it was several weeks ago when we were kind of starting this last game stretch, and talk was how many games did they need to win. I always felt you wanted to be in that 21 win kind of range just to make it safe. We talked last week about how you don't want to leave these sorts of things up to chance. If you have opportunities, just take them and eliminate that variable of giving the committee or some metric a chance to leave you out. And that was the big key to this Michigan games. It gives you that extra win. You looked pretty good that entire game. You tended to, once halftime, you're up 7 and you took control in that second half. And Michigan, they were down 20 at one point, and they made a few runs, but they never really were able to threaten essentially that second half. And that's what a tournament team should do at this point. They should look good. You should be able to control a game like this against a team. Let's be honest. Nebraska is a way better team than Michigan is. That's not even a question.
Yeah, it wasn't really in doubt.
Michigan basketball is in disarray, and it's a mess. So that's how you need to look in that game. And I think that you got yourself to a point now. Everyone says you're safe now in the tournament. So 22 wins, that's great. Like you said, I don't think I could have even had enough cocktails to predict Nebraska third, finishing in the Big Ten to start the season. I think most of us were happy to be, we think somewhere in the middle for, a 500 team in conference, and that's kind of what our goal was. I bet if we go back and listen to our shows, I bet we would have all been pretty happy with something like that. And this bunch, did much better than that. So,
and most of that was, a big part of it was getting a couple of key victories against the high Q1 teams. But at the end of the day, to get off the bubble, Rob, they did have to go win games they were supposed to win.
Yep.
And that's exactly how you do get off the bubble. Bubble teams, or true bubble teams, are the ones that can't quite seem to figure it all out, and they end up, going 500 down the stretch. Well, this team wins 6 out of 7, right? And it made it real easy for the selection committee to take them off of the bubble.
Yeah, and not only that, but even back then, I didn't even feel like they should be on the bubble in the first place. But you're right, Dave.
They proved that they
proved that they didn't belong there too. And then you were talking about how it probably felt like an 8 a.m. game for those guys out there in Michigan. It was in fact a 9 a.m. game in Las Vegas, which was like so weird. I woke up about 8:50, and I see either Honky or Boomer send out a tweet, and I'm like, oh God, the game starts in 10 minutes. I'm like trying to do math in my head, like barely even with my eyes open. So I'm turning on the TV. My wife's like, is this what we're going to be doing all day? I was like, no, by the time you get ready and by the time like we get downstairs and actually get our coffee, the game will be over. So and sure enough, it was like 11:20 or so. The game was done. I was just finishing up my coffee. It's a beautiful thing. And they're going to be going into the Big Ten tournament now, as you said, with the 3 seed and not playing until Friday. And it was kind of weird. I was like looking up the Big Ten tournament, and like Wednesday, no game. Thursday, no game. Friday. Oh, there it is. Oh, wait, there's no games listed yet either. We don't even know who we're playing yet. So
that's right. Yeah. Honky, you don't have to complain about us being on Peacock on Wednesday. Or even having to watch some random Thursday afternoon game.
Yeah, it's approximately 8 p.m. on Friday. And the best part is, though, Honky does have my Peacock login. So,
He has your what?
My Peacock login. It's a family show, Dave. It's a family show.
The night game, that's a nice added benefit, too, is that this isn't one of those games on Friday where you're going to have to get out of work early or anything like that. It's going to be the 8 o'clock game, which probably means it's starting at 8:30 or 9 after 4 prior games. I'm guessing those aren't going to all finish right on time. So, but to Rob's point, it's great to have the double bye. We've had the double bye twice before, and both times we've lost right away. And so this is the season. No, this is important. This
Mhm.
Nebraska needs to do well in a tournament setting. I think what the women showed last weekend showed well to what I think they can do in the NCAA, that you're going to be playing back-to-back games. In their case, they played 4 straight. That's something that we need to be able to do. The guys need to be able to show that. And the last 2 times that we've had a top 4 setting, a double bye, the guys, even with some momentum behind them, they went out there and lost right away. That's something that this team can change that trend too. I mean, that's a big deal to get off to a good start on Friday and move on to the semis.
So the last 2 times we've had the double bye would have been in the 2018 year that we won 22 games, went 13-5 in conference,
Yep.
lose
Lost
in
to
the first
Michigan
round.
right away.
Yeah, and then didn't even get a home game in NIT. And then the other one would have been the Tran Petaway year.
Yeah, 2014 we lost to Ohio State right away.
Gotcha.
In that one.
Yep,
So
that's right. Yeah, and we had a big lead in that, if I remember right. They were just rolling, and it looked like they were going to steamroll them, and then they faltered in the second half, and they never seemed to really recover from that, losing to Arkansas in the next game of the tournament.
or actually Baylor, yeah, but
Baylor, right?
Yeah, but that was a tough way to end that year. We go out and we have that great finish, no sit Sunday, and then what kind of gets lost is no sit Sunday was the last win of the season. It was the 19th win.
Right.
That team never made 20. Here we are sitting at 22, and we've got some momentum, 6 of 7, as you've already said. So we've got some momentum. Let's keep going.
Yeah, and let's get those wins, right? So let's talk a little seeding, and then maybe we'll talk about the net rankings because this is everyone's favorite topic is net rankings, at least on our text thread, because we have broken down the net 8,000 ways from Sunday, and yeah, so Honky, last week you talked a little bit about how you felt Nebraska could earn an improved seed, 1 seed at a time with each extra victory. So I guess maybe you could say that's played out. It seems like we're kind of showing up as a 9 seed on a lot of the brackets now instead of a 10, and we got 1 extra victory. The Friday night game, it could be against Indiana, a team we've already beat twice, but a team that's been playing much better as of late, or it could be Michigan or Penn State, teams that we've also beaten already. Who's your favorite matchup there? And do you feel like if we win on Friday night, do we somehow move up another seat on the magical committee's lines?
Well, my point last week was I thought if we can beat Michigan, we can get up to maybe an 8 seed. And if we start off as an 8 seed, then depending on who you play, that each additional win could subtract 1 off of that. So you win 1 game, you win on Friday. Excuse me. Now you're a 7 seed. You win 2 games and make it to the championship. You're a 6 seed. If you win the championship, now you're a 5 seed, maybe even a fringe 4, depending if the right things happen. Right. That was kind of my thinking. And then pretty much everything I've seen since, and we'll go over the net rankings to kind of go over this. But I'm not right. It's not going to happen that way because. I mean, watching on Sunday, you have to, I love Nick Bob, but he keeps saying, God, if they win today, you got to get them in, right? I'm like, hell yeah, you got to get them in. They're 22 wins. Like, why do we have to have this conversation about Nebraska, that we have to do so many metrics and so many things that seemingly other teams, have been in for months now, with no biting of the nails, and we've got to do everything perfect, and we can't. You've got to win away games because we're the only ones that aren't. All those things. So. Yeah, I don't think that we're going to be a 5 seed if we win the whole dang thing. At this point, no, we probably won't be. Yeah. We're a 9 seed. It seems like a fairly consistent 9 seed right now. And, I mean, I don't know if we could get a win or 2, maybe we can move up to an 8, but then what the hell is the difference between 8 and 9 at that point?
Yeah, maybe a 7, right? Rob, you want to interject on something?
Oh, I was just going to say that Husker baseball completed the game, bottom of the 9th. They did give up 1 hit and then closed it out. So they won 8-6 this evening.
Right.
So
nice.
Some of
RPI
those
number 3 right now.
RPI number 3 right now, playing Wichita
rolling.
State in one of the nicest college baseball stadiums in the country.
It is. It's huge.
It is. They got 1 more game tomorrow, but that's a good, even if they split that series, that's still a good split from an RPI. We can call that a great loss if they lose. So
that's right. Well, we'll talk a little bit more about baseball and around the Van Horn, but just wanted to give that,
of course,
our huge live watchers and listeners. So, all right.
10 wins, as Andy says. Yep.
Yeah,
right.
that's
Keep
right.
going.
That's
Sorry,
right.
Dave.
No, that's all right. So
It's the best.
so
It's the
seeding-wise,
best start for Nebraska baseball in years. So
yeah, I agree. Maybe Rob, you can actually put a year to that when we get to around the Van Horn.
I will.
So yeah, Honky, you're right. They're not gonna get a 4 seed. Thanks for that breaking news. But
Breaking
maybe
news
they
there,
could get to
yes.
a 7. I think if they win the tournament, maybe a 7. And that's if they there's clearly ways where they could. The funky thing with the lines that the seeding committee has to work with, I think they take. It's just kind of like football where they take 6 teams and they're comparing resumes and then they chop one off and they add another one in and they keep on doing that. And essentially they create a snaking 1 through 64 essentially, right? And they those at larges, if you're going to move Nebraska up, they got to push others down, and then it gets complicated really when it gets late in the game, because then there's other factors like location and making sure you're not playing another conference opponent and all this stuff, right? And so it just gets harder and harder to actually see those moves happen late in the conference tournaments. But to your point, is it better to be a 7 than a 10? Maybe, because maybe you're moving out of playing St. Mary's or Gonzaga or something, and you're actually playing a 10-seeded team, right? And if we value moving up the seed line, that means we think 7-seeded teams are better than 10-seeded teams. I don't know if the math plays out on that, on how the tournament shakes out, on how often 7s beat 10s or not. But in theory, you should have a better chance to win.
Yeah, I kind of want to go through some of the net, and I'm comparing Nebraska right now. We're at number 37 in the net ranking, and the reason that we're highlighting the net ranking is that is the one that is most used now, I guess. Or the one, Dave, what's exactly the purpose of the net? It has replaced the RPI and the KenPom with the
correct. I mean,
it
didn't replace KenPom. The selection committee has all those other metrics, but this is their own metric that was vetted through a whole bunch of coaches and a various different committee that created it, and it's intended to be an evaluation tool. And we can talk a little bit after we walk through some of these comparable resumes on what we probably see, and some other coaches now are starting to say is a fault of the net, and we'll be very curious to see if they fix it before next season. If not, I sure hope that. And honestly, Honky, if you think about it, I would argue that Fred might have actually scheduled knowing how the net works anyway. The only thing his plan, because we played a bunch of horrible quad 4s and won them all, right? And we played only a couple of good non-cons, Kansas State. Now, Oklahoma State really doesn't fall into that category. But the only thing we didn't do right in that formula to have a great net all year long was blow out those quad 4 wins, right? And to Boomer's point, probably have some bad losses early in Big Ten play. Because what we've learned is it's the efficiency of these teams that the net takes into account. And that's what we game the system.
Well, I think efficiency is it's a loaded word, because I think that can mean a whole lot of whatever the hell you want it to mean. But
you're very efficient at eating wings, for example.
Yeah, I know. But if we look at the net rankings here, I'm going to go through a couple of teams and compare Nebraska to them. Like I said, we're number 37, and let's compare it number 22 Wisconsin. Here we are. We're sitting at 22-9. They're at 19-12. If you look at our quad 1 and quad 2 records, which are very important in this, we are 8-9 in quad 1, quad 2. We're 4-6 in quad 1. We're 4-3 in quad 2. Wisconsin's 11-12. So they played a few more games than we have. We played 17 of them. They played 23 of them. They are 4-8 in quad 1. They are 7-4 in quad 2. We are 14-0 in quad 3, quad 4 games. So no bad losses. Same for Wisconsin. They're 8-0. And then if you look at strength of schedule, and we've been beat up at times with the discussions of our off season. We didn't schedule as hard, blah, blah, blah. There's some other teams have gone out scheduled harder. We're number 45. They're number 10 in strength of schedule. The away record, neutral/away record, which there was so much discussion about all season when we hadn't had the wins, we're now 4-8 in that, and Wisconsin's 5-9. So, I mean, I think you can look at some of those metrics, and I think Wisconsin being 5-9 in a way, their strength of schedule is certainly up there. They've won a decent amount in the quad 1, quad 2. I can understand, 22, 37. I don't know. We're in the neighborhood of each other. I think we could make an argument that Nebraska could be closer to them or even ahead of them, but this doesn't seem to be a appalling difference between the two.
Right.
To go to look at the one that has been the real bugaboo kind of on social media is Michigan State. And so again, here we are at 37, Michigan State's at 24. We are at 22-9. Michigan State's at 18-13. If they lose a game in the Big Ten tournament, Dave, I think you were the one that sent us out that if they get to 14 losses, they're one of only, and actually get in, they would be one of only a handful of teams to get into the NCAA tournament over the years with 14 losses, at least as an at-large. But here we are. We're at 8-9 in quad 1 and quad 2. They're at 8-13. So, I mean, Nebraska from a quad 1, quad 2 standpoint, we're holding our own with them. We're 14-0 in quad 3, quad 4. They're 10-0. They have the 14th strength of schedule. We have the 45th. They are 4-9 in away neutral games. We're 4-8. So we've got the little graphic there of Izzo, and we've heard there's an Izzo effect, and I believe that. I believe that there could be an Izzo effect, that there could be a blue blood effect. But that leads me to the next one here, which is Michigan State against Indiana. And for whatever I get the blue blood bias against Nebraska, but here's Michigan State at 24, and here's Indiana at 93. I mean, there are 69 spots difference between these two, and they have the exact same record, almost exact same quad 1, quad 2. Indiana has one loss in the quad 3. Their strength of schedule, Michigan State has a little bit better one. Indiana is one up on them on away and neutral records. So, but from a blue blood bias, I would look at that and go, Indiana's as blue blood as they come. So I'm not sure what the difference and why you have this gigantic difference there, other than efficiency. We can always say efficiency, but efficiency, again, it's a loaded word. I'm going to show three more slides, and then we're going to
Honky, what font is that?
Oh, that's a third grader. Okay. And so now I want to compare us to a couple of teams. I just compared us to two fellow Big Ten teams. Now I'm going to compare us to two mid-majors. And the first one would be Indiana State, number 29 from the Missouri Valley. They're 27-6. We're 22-9. They are 8 spots ahead of us in the net. They are 5-5 in quad 1, quad 2 games. And again, we're 8-9 in them. So they've played 7 less games. They are 1-4 in quad 1. We're 4-6. So they've played half as many games in quad 1. They've only won one of them. So you have to have those great wins. That's what hurt us in 2018. Indiana State sitting there at number 29. They only have one quad 1 win. They're 22-1 in quad 3, quad 4. 22-1, and their one loss was a quad 4. They have a 100 strength of schedule to our 45, and they are 15-5 in away neutral games. We're 4-8. Next, Florida Atlantic. Yes, they had success last year in the NCAA tournament, no doubt. They're 24-7. We're 22-9. They are 10-5 in quad 1, quad 2. We're 8-9. They've played 4 quad 1 games. They are 14-2 in quad 3, quad 4. Both of their losses are against quad 4 teams, so 2 bad losses. They're number 80 in strength of schedule to our 45. They're 11-6 in neutral away, and we're 4-8. And the last but not least in all this is the Mountain West. There are 6 teams in the net that are ahead of us in the net rankings right now, all from the Mountain West. We're number 37. San Diego State's number 20. Boise's number 23. New Mexico's number 28. Nevada's 31. Utah State's 33. Colorado State's 36. All of them have similar records, 22-9. 4 of them have that, the exact same as us. Nevada and Utah State each have 26-6 and 26-5 records. But their strength of schedules, every one of them are behind us. We're number 45 in strength of schedule. Every one of these is between 52 and 89. And I guess, so that's a whole lot of information there. We're going to kind of take a step back, digest what we just saw there. But what I'm trying to get is some kind of consistency. Because what we've been told is at one point it was really important that we had to win away games, because if we didn't, we were going to be the only ones that didn't. But then I just showed you a couple of teams, Michigan State and
it all evened out. This is why I was confident earlier in the year. Is like I think we're going to win a couple of these late road games. And
sure, and we win them. But yet, as Nick Boss said on Sunday, boy, we better win that game or else we don't know if we're in.
I was just saying that.
But it's more than that, Dave. It's this inability to move up when other teams can't even move down, even if they continue to lose. We've won 6 of our last 7. Some of these other ones are losing 6 of the last 7.
Yeah, well, let's talk about Michigan State for a second. Then I want to throw it to maybe Boomer or Rob if you want to talk about efficiency and what we've better understand, because I mean it's a flaw and how you can game the net is to be offensively and defensively efficient in your wins. right? Which is and to Honky's point, it's moving the goalpost, right? It's this constant thing, right? Now, I don't get all worked up about it as much as others. I mean, Honky gets worked up. Skip, our producer Skip, also gets worked up. He's a Colorado State fan, and he's as frustrated as Honky about some of this stuff. Because I don't believe the net is like as determined as big of a determining factor as the RPI was back 20 or 30 years ago, when there was a lot less metrics to look at and an inability to look at all the game film. Now this committee has way more information, and we've seen where there's teams that have been in the net in the 20s. I think Clemson was maybe a couple of years ago, or was it last year, and didn't make the tournament because they didn't have some of the other stuff. We've seen teams in the 60s or 70s in the net, which would be an extremely bad RPI number back in the day, and they've made the tournament, right? So it's clear the committee doesn't only use the net, but the net is being gamed by some teams, and maybe the Mountain West is an example. We've heard, and there's other coaches like Jeff Capel at Pittsburgh saying that saying that Big 12 is gaming the net by just beating the crap out of quad 3 and quad 4 teams, and showing efficiency numbers. And so we'll get to that. But Michigan State, Honky, to your point of like being locked in, yes, the net has not moved. It's ridiculous, right? They're still 24th in the net. But if you're starting to look at all the brackets, they have slowly moved down ever so slowly the last 3 weeks as they've gone on this massive losing streak. And you're looking at bracket matrix, which takes in 122 projected brackets. Michigan State is now on the 10th line. Well, it's like 4 teams behind Nebraska. Now, should they be further behind? Maybe, Honky. That's the point. But it has finally hurt them. I mean, it hasn't gone unnoticed by a bunch of people that are trying to get this right. That Michigan State is essentially now on the bubble. Not only do teams with 14 losses rarely make the tournament, it's around a dozen or so since 1985 when it got expanded to 64. 18 and 14 in particular is always only happened once. And so they're 18 and 13 right now. So if they lose their first game, they are in real trouble, I think. No doubt about it. They need to win at least one game to get to 19, and obviously preferably more than that. But I guess at this point, I have no trust that Michigan State is in the tournament.
The argument that I have, though, and that I've had for weeks, is that there are goalposts that constantly move, and there's so many inconsistencies, and there are some teams that seem to have had to do so many things that other teams don't have to do, or it doesn't matter as much if this whatever this one metric is, because there's no shortage of metrics.
No, yeah,
and you can find
about the net in particular.
And when we start adding efficiencies into it, that wonderful word efficiencies. I mean, we're the number 1 defense in the country, supposedly. I've seen those stats, but I guess we're not efficient enough on defense for whatever that means. But I'm not saying that that's not important, because we had a great text chain going today, and I think Skip brought up some great points. I think we've deciphered the code a little bit of this NET. Is that honestly, like you said at the beginning, Dave, apparently you really need to blow out those quad 4 teams even more than what we did. There's some quad 4 teams we blew out. We blew out South Carolina State. Sure. I don't know what more we needed to do, but we may have had a couple of close games. Now you go back to what our record was. We were 14-0 in quad 3, quad 4. So then maybe the answer is, well, you need to play less of those and you need to play a better schedule. Okay, well then I show you those Indiana States and the Florida Atlantics and all the Mountain West where we are ahead of every one of them in strength of schedule. Not even close. If you look at the top strength and schedule right now in the country, we're 3-3 against 5 teams from the top 14. I mean, we played a good schedule. Our conference, just being in the Big Ten, is going to naturally move us into that, especially this year compared to 2018. It's this lack of consistency on how they apply these rules. I mean, yes, we'd be in better shape if we would have won at Rutgers and at Minnesota, 2 games that we had double-digit leads and we lost. Absolutely would have. But every single team at this point, you could say the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
Nebraska got blown out. Yes, we got blown out. The number 1 teams in the country, 2 number 1 teams came into this state and got blown out. UConn and Purdue. And so, what is the most important part of net? What is the most important metric? Because it seems like we keep doing the things that we need to do now, and yet there's just to try to move anywhere. It doesn't happen.
According to the Honk Palm, where is Nebraska ranked?
The Honk Palm right now, honestly, the Honk Palm would have us probably a 7. I would probably have us a 7 right now, 22-9, and the 3 seed in the Big Ten. I'd have us as a 7 seed. And if we won a game, if we beat Indiana, I might keep us around a 7. And then if we won 2 games, got to the championship game, I definitely would move us to a 6. If we won it, I'd move us to a 5. That's what the honk palm would do. We would be a 5 seed with the well, if you think about it, we're number 35 in the AP poll right now with votes, and 35 would get you'd be an 8 seed. We'd be an 8 seed right now.
Yeah.
We'd be exactly what I said last week we should be.
Yep. Yeah. So, Boomer, when we talk about any sort of math here behind these efficiency numbers and what they're actually looking for?
Yeah, essentially, and that's really what the key is to understand the net, and that's how it all kind of gets set. It's what they're looking at is kind of a net efficiency, which is the difference between a team's offensive and defensive efficiency. And what they're looking at is for offensive efficiency, they look at your team's field goal attempts, your rebounds, turnovers, and free throw attempts, and they divide your points by your numbers of possessions. That gives you an offensive efficiency number. And for a defensive efficiency, they're looking at your opponents, those same stats in that game. And then they get your efficiency ratings, you subtract defense from offense, and that gives you your net efficiency. And that's really the big key to what's determining your net rankings and kind of what sets where you're at, because that's determines what your quads are, when you're playing these teams, based on, your efficiency rankings and how it rates it. And that's kind of where, I think the big challenge with the NET that we've discovered comes in. It's, if you can, as we saw with, Big 12, and as Pitt's coach was complaining about, almost the entire Big 12 schedule just cream puffs for the most part, and
cream puffs.
Almost all of them, except for like Oklahoma State and K-State, who were oddly enough towards the bottom of the NET rankings, and they beat the crap out of them. And one of the reasons they wanted to move away from the RPI was, they wanted to get away from margin of victory having a meaning, in a game. So they, the margin of victory is capped at 10 points, I think, of the NET.
Yeah,
rankings,
that's right.
I remember right. So it doesn't matter if you beat a team by 10, you beat it by 30, but if you're getting blown out in a game, those underlying metrics are going to be out of whack anyway. I mean, if you're getting smoked by 30 by somebody, that's going to reflect itself in these
and vice versa.
Ratings. So it's still there.
But Boomer, and I think you're explaining it perfectly. But doesn't this just get to be ridiculous? Like at some point, don't we value wins and losses? I mean, I don't want to take it into a football thing, but we've already seen a 12-0.
Nope, we've already determined the national championship towards the net. It's already the most efficient team wins.
I mean, I look at Indiana and Michigan State, and Indiana in a very close game, just 1 by 1 against Michigan State. But if I'm a Hoosier right now and I'm looking at these side by side, I'd be saying, like, who gives a shit about offensive efficiency? When does winning matter? And then to your point there, Boomer, it doesn't really matter if you blow someone out because we're going to cap it at 10 anyways. What matters? I still struggle when I look at these. When I look at these,
and it's how you win. It's how you win early. Is kind of what it seems to be. If we're going to compare, Sparty and Indiana, they both played some decent non-con opponents. I don't have Sparty in front of me, but I know Indiana. They played like UConn and lost by 20. I mean, they lost like 77-57. And then they played Auburn early on in December and just got waxed. It was like 104-70 something. And that, I think, is what crippled Indiana, net rankings, were those big blowouts where the efficiency rankings are going to be a disaster. And I think once the big challenge is once you get set in these rankings and once you hit the conference, it gets ossified. And that's, what Pitt was complaining about with the Big 12 is they, scheduled soft so they could build up these huge efficiency rankings. So they're all quad ones essentially when they play each other because they're all highly ranked teams.
Yep.
And then once they're all quad 1 teams, you can win or lose, and it's not
doesn't matter. You can lose 12 quad 1 games.
As long as you're not getting blown out every week by everybody in your conference. If you're playing 500 ball, all quad 1 and 2 games.
But even Indiana's case,
advantage.
Even Indiana's case there, you're right. They got blown out, but it doesn't matter if they lose by 10, they lose by 10. They're not going to count any more than that, right? Indiana played Kansas.
Again, it depends how efficient you are in getting blown out.
It's the efficiency. When you get blown out or blow someone out, your efficiency numbers are going to be good. That's the problem, Honk. It's total crap. They say it's capped at 10. It's not capped at 10. The efficiency numbers are clearly different when you blow someone out or get blown out.
And there also used to be that whole thing about, I know they don't use this stat right now, but used to be the last 10 games too. How is a team doing it over the course? But over the course of a season, how does a team develop? I mean, I guess you lose a couple bad games in December, you might as well just call it quits. You can't change anything. If I'm Indiana, by the end of the season, you can give me all the analytics you want about how Michigan State is better than you because they didn't get blown out and back in November or in December against UConn. But you're Indiana saying, we just beat them. We just beat them yesterday.
Yeah,
by the end of the season, we're a different
I think
team.
we all agree, Honky, that it's flawed.
It's
I
flawed.
think we all
It's
just
beyond flawed.
understand why it's flawed, and
I
hopefully
think
we can fix it.
I look at this Indiana one. I look at the Indiana one right now. I think this one is as damning as any of them. If I was Indiana and Michigan State, and you're sitting there with almost identical win-loss and away neutral and all those things, I'm sitting there. I'd be sitting there going, "How is this one team safe?" Now, Dave, to your point, we have finally gotten to the point with Michigan State where we say they're not safe. It has taken us to this moment to finally say that, but they've gone through a whole season where they're not safe or where they're safe. And then here's Indiana. You don't have a chance. And all of a sudden, boom, at the very end, they end up the exact same rate. Record and everything.
I totally get it. And maybe Boomer, if you can actually find some efficiency numbers, I'd be curious. Rob, if I'm not mistaken, opposed to Indiana, who lost to number 1 ranked UConn right now by 20 points. I think Sparty lost to your Arizona Wildcats by like 6, I want to say, in a very close, well-played game. Apparently, that's totally fine. To Hockey's point, they lost to a top-ranked team, and it was like, that's how Izzo schedules, right? You take on the tough teams in November, and then that'll pay off because you'll be battle ready by March, right? And then they've gone off and only won 10 games in conference, but Arizona probably has a fine net number, I guess. Rob?
I mean, it's Arizona's net is like 3. So
that's even playing in the weak Pac-12.
Okay, but yeah, I mean, in Arizona schedules games like where they go and they play basically a neutral court game. That's what they called it.
Yeah.
Against Purdue in Indianapolis. So that neutral court game where
Purdue beat them.
And Purdue did beat them. Yeah, Purdue beat them pretty good, but I mean, it definitely was not a neutral court game in that, and that drives me crazy too. Just call it what it is. It's a home game for Purdue in a larger stadium. Like they played, you know what I mean? Like that sort of thing drives me crazy too, because you're basically playing it, and it's kind of as a neutral site where, in effect, Purdue actually had an extra home game there. Right. And so there's a lot of things about the way that the rankings go, the system goes. I mean, it's all just so wacky. And you can't look me in the eye and tell me that, like perfect example is Michigan State, though, in that, you can't sit there and just tell me that that 80% of why they're still in the tournament and ranked higher than Nebraska is because they played Arizona early on. It has everything to do with Tom Izzo and just Michigan State as that. And I mean, you could show me all the stats in the world trying to back it up. And the fact of the matter is
you'll just simply say it's clear coaching bias. And that
it is. They would rather have a Tom Izzo team. The closer he gets to his retirement, I mean, all of those things.
It's been this way for 20 years for Izzo, at least. So.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying though is that but now he's he's probably getting closer, and after Coach K.
Yeah, I get it, Rob. Honk, I think Boomer just put up some efficiency numbers there, and I mean, I don't need to buy in them or not. They are what they are. Sparty's 93 offense, 34 defense. Indiana's 183 offense and 232 defense.
Yeah,
there's a difference there, and I'm not saying that should make the biggest difference, but that's apparently what the net cares about, right? And so, Skip, I think, had a really good proposal in our text thread. I'll give this credit completely to producer Skip, is saying they need to weight a blowout win from an efficiency standpoint versus a quad 4 differently than if you do that versus a quad 1, right? That could be a simple solution. Is they have a weighting system where those efficiency numbers mean more against quality teams.
Sure. I mean, we've introduced new stats to make this even more complicated, in my humble opinion. I mean, at one point it used to be strength of schedule mattered, but I went through our rankings there, and we're ahead of teams in strength of schedule. We got dogged on strength of schedule for the whole first half of the season because we didn't schedule hard enough in the first half. At least that was the narrative. No,
I agree.
But when we end it, we're far ahead of Indiana State's, and we're far ahead of Florida Atlantic. We're far ahead of the entire Mountain West. We've been told you can't lose those bad games. Bad games are bad. There's teams that have lost quad 3 and quad 4 games that are ahead of us. We didn't lose any of them, but we can get really down and deep into efficiency numbers, and that's awesome. It just feels like you can always create a stat to make your narrative, whatever the narrative of a committee to be. Like I like to think of the football committee here, and it was, hey, you got an injured quarterback. You can't, that's the new narrative there. That was the new stat was you can't have an injured quarterback. Pretty sure if Alabama had an injured quarterback, they'd have figured out a way to get Alabama in, right? Yep. And Dave, even when you and I talked on the phone the other day, or we were texting, we talked about there is a blue blood bias. Now, I don't know if blue blood bias has worked its way into NET rankings. I'm not sure. I'd be interested to see if there's a blue blood. I don't
think so, but it is
bias there. But it's maddening there. And yes, I mean, I'm the first one to acknowledge Indiana has some bad losses there in the non-conference. They also lost by 4 to Kansas, for what it's worth. But it just and Michigan State blew out Baylor. So there are some differences. I'm just looking at things like, is it a 69-point difference in the net when you have two teams at the exact same ranking? And Rob.
Yeah. So anyways, it's pretty clear there's flaws there. And if the net was purely just simply seeded off of net, right? Auburn, who has a number 6 net ranking, would be a 2 seed, right? Anybody here thinks Auburn is going to be a 2 seed? No, they're probably a 5 seed, right? So like that's always the grain of salt on all of this, is we can sit here and rip apart the net, and it deserves to get ripped apart at this point because people have found faults in it. But the committee already knows those faults, apparently, because I don't think anybody thinks Auburn is going to be a 2 seed, even though the net would tell you they would be a 2 seed. Or Michigan State should be a 6 seed because of where they're at. It's just not going to happen, right? So there's faults, right? I mean, again, I'd like to think that the committee is taking more things into account. Is it perfect? Probably not. Yes, it's over data analyzed, but I'd say 20 or 30 years ago, when all they really had was the RPI, they could look at the last 10 games and look at some stats. There was more opportunities for mistakes, especially on the edges, right? The bubble was, we had a lot more controversy about the bubble 20 years ago on a regular basis, not so much any longer.
Okay. I love that. Bring that one back up, would you, Boomer? This is Dave. I think this is a nice tie into the end of this, is that this isn't a contentious discussion from Andy. Love that us Husker fans get to talk madness talk. It's really fun and refreshing. Absolutely. I mean, my goodness, this is year 7 of the Redcast. We started this thing in 2017, and we've never had these conversations in March. So it is fun to be able to do this. It's fun to be able to debate exactly how the net rankings, are screwing us over, because I'm sure we're not the first team to say that. But I like the discussion, because to me, it was more about trying to find some consistencies with it. But also, I think that what Skip on our text chain, Dave, what we've been talking about, what Boomer went through with all those stats, I'm not even arguing the efficiencies. I think that we've cracked a little bit of the code, so to speak, of why. Yeah. Because it's not as simple. It's clearly not as simple as just looking at two teams, ranking them next to each other, saying this is what your ranking is, this is what your Q1, Q3, this is your away, neutral, your strength of schedule. It's not as simple as that, because we're finding all kinds of inconsistencies if you only look at that.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, it's the classic like blind resume test, right? Yeah. All right, guys. Anything else on basketball? That was a fun one.
Let's ask this question real quick. If we win the Big Ten, Dave, what were our seed be? What's our ceiling? I guess I already said 5.
Let's go around. You said 5. Boom.
I said 5.
Boy, I'd probably say 6 or 7 is probably your ceiling.
You got to pick one.
You got to remember there's all those teams above us that you've got to.
I know all about the teams above us. Man. You got to pick one though, Boomer. You got to say one number.
Let's just say the last 6 could be our ceiling. Yeah.
Okay.
More likely 7.
Rob?
I'm going to agree with Honky and say 5. Because you're winning the Big Ten tournament. You finished 3rd in the Big Ten regular season.
You'd be 25-9.
Yeah. You'd be 25-9, and you would have beaten Purdue, who's a 1 seed.
Assuming we beat Purdue. I guess that's
you would have beaten we beat Purdue in the season. You know
I'm talking about like
general. Yeah.
And you'll beat Purdue again. Go Big Red.
Yeah, and
Dave?
I guess up to that point, it does depend maybe on who you beat a little bit, right? If it ends up being a super easy path, and we play, Michigan and another
Ohio
upset,
State instead.
in the
Instead of
semi,
Illinois.
and then we, beat a struggling Wisconsin team at the end or something like that. Yeah. But I'll say a 7. I think that from their math perspective and being able to move stuff around, I think it'd be hard for them to get us on the 6th line. So I'll say they could get us to a 7.
And you're probably right. So,
all right. Well, it's going to be fun, right? I mean, the fact is, we're watching a basketball game on Friday night. That matters, but also doesn't matter. That's a first. It feels like in a long time. I mean, we know we're going to make the tournament. If we win, we know we get to play on CBS on Saturday afternoon and potentially improve our seating. And maybe if we play on Sunday, get a lot of national exposure right before the selection committee comes on. And then we'll find out when we're playing next week, right? It'd either be a Thursday, Friday, and then a Saturday, Sunday. Our friends out here, our Colorado State fans, CU might actually make it. Plonky's going to be coming out. It's going to be a lot of fun.
hey, Dave, we have one other question here. This is with the women's team here, but do we have any guesses for the seeds on where the women's team will go? They finished second, obviously, in the Big Ten.
In the tournament, 5th in the regular season, right?
Yeah, 5th in the regular season, second in the tournament. What are you seeing? I mean, I was seeing at one point like an 8 for them. I don't know if that's gone up.
I think if they might get to a 7. I'll start with Boomer this time. What do you think, Boom?
Yeah, I don't know all the teams that are around them that would be above them. What I had been seeing was an 8. Yeah, I would say a ceiling of 7, depending on how everything else shaked out these last few days. But I would expect an 8 seed, probably right around there.
Yeah. Whoever's the number 1 seed in that bracket, it's not going to look forward to seeing a Nebraska team that does not fear Iowa. So, Rob, what do you think?
I mean, I'll say anywhere from. I have to pick one, don't I?
Yes.
I'll say a 7 seed. I'll play right in the middle there. I'll say a 7 seed.
I'll also go 7. Honk, what do you say?
Well, the Honk Palm says that they were very efficient offensively and defensively against Iowa. So I'll make them a 3 seed. Why the hell not? I mean, who knows? So
I think they could play to
that
level.
I don't know if you guys are aware of this or not. I mean, obviously, the Nebraska women are not. They're not ranked in the top 25 right now, but they are. But they got 21 votes this week, and so I would say that would be the second most votes that are outside of it. 27 teams. I mean, who knows? And then there's a lot of smaller conference. I don't know, like probably 6 or 7 is probably realistic, I guess.
Yep, I agree.
The Rob Palm metrics are also really deep there. Really,
I mean, you know me, Dave. I like the eye test.
Yeah. The Honk Palm metrics are not reproducible. They also change like from half to half. I mean, there are games Nebraska's been, like
it's a proprietary blend of BS.
At halftime of the Wisconsin game at home, we were somewhere in the 200s, and by the end of it, we were like 13. So it fluctuates. I
didn't realize the women were 26 in net ranking too.
There you go.
So there you go. I mean, I'm moving them up to a 5. All right.
There we go.
All right, guys. We're ready to talk just a little bit of baseball?
Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
Let's go around the Van Horn and talk all things Will Bolt and boys. And as Rob let us know earlier in the show, they got a mid-season victory against Wichita State down there in Wichita, 8-6. They're up 7-1, I believe, early, and gave up some runs late, but held on. That gives them 10 wins. So they're 10-4
they're
now.
10-4. So it's at least their best start since 2021.
Yeah, I just checked the Warren Nolan real-time RPI. They're still number 3. Wichita State is number 50, who they're playing right now. So, and Dave, this gets, man, I'm more into analytics than I've ever been before on the show. But
that's true. That's true.
The RPI, we've talked about how as much as we dislike how early college baseball starts, it has benefited us in the sense that we've played a lot of games away from home, which early in the season it can help inflate your RPI. And we're playing teams that are all, South Alabama was, and now Wichita State and Charleston. They've all been top 75 RPI teams, and we're playing them on the road.
Yeah,
You know,
that's right.
it's interesting too, Dave, because you know, this is, I would say so far, this is the best start of the Will Bolt era, obviously. And that being said, as well, is that 21 is kind of one of those, I'll call it, I won't call it throwaway season because they played, but they also did not play as many games because of COVID. Right. And so these are like some of the best teams from like the peak Erstat era of like 14 through 17, where they were winning regionals. And at that point on weekday games, I think they had a record between that 4-year span of 38-9. So it'd be nice to kind of see this team get back to that kind of performance level. The pitching looked good till like the last couple of innings, and you know, it just kind of fell apart. But it's also college baseball, so that's going to happen a little bit more often than not, you know, especially with these aluminum bats and ball coming off there a little quicker. You know, but at the same time, you know, it's really nice to see this team come out, and even when they're down, it was like the first time they'd come back from down 5 runs over the weekend against South Alabama since 2015, I think I heard the announcer say. They hadn't been able to overcome, maybe it was 2019, hadn't been able to overcome a 5-run deficit in any game, and they did that. So, I mean, the team is extremely resilient. They're coming out. The bats are starting to heat up. You know, they're scoring around 7 runs a game, you know, and that's good enough to win right now. So, and they're playing tough competition. So,
yeah, I mean, I think, you know, hopefully this RPI, the Big Ten has actually done relatively good in non-con. You know, Iowa and others are winning some games. So the Big Ten in general has a decent RPI. RPI is way too early to really count until I'd say April at best. But I mean, the reality is if everybody has some decent non-con victories here, Big Ten RPI will look better, and that means our conference games will ultimately look better as we go forward. So, I mean, I think the team could be in a good position here for a change, right? And Rob, I would say the 2021 year, even though it was odd, we all played just conference games that year, was not a throwaway because we were very close to advancing to a super regional, and I think that's what we want to continue to aspire to. So
I don't disagree. The number of games played and whatnot. I think that team would have been kind of ranked a lot better than it was in the end in overall historical Nebraska teams, but there's no way to really tell because it was just a shortened season. That's my point. They played really well. So.
Fair enough. Mm-hmm. So so Honky, obviously got a homestand coming up here, and you know, now we'll start to hopefully have some good enough weather. It's supposed to snow here starting on Thursday. I don't know what Nebraska is going to look like. Are we worried?
No, it's supposed to go up and down temperature-wise next week. I mean, we're going to have a couple 70s, some 60s, 50s, and I think there's 40s on one day. But so I'm sure we'll get the one day where there's 40s. It'll be right at, you know, first pitch. But you know, I'm curious. You know, we're a month into the season now, so 14 games into it. Well, I guess a quarter of the season done already. And what are we starting to see from this team? You know, Walsh was a starter the first weekend, I think, and tonight he was starting, you know, against Wichita State and gave us a good start. And so and then Drew Christo has kind of worked his way into the weekend, and so we're starting to see some of that development going on there with Childress. Obviously, last week we had Rhett Stokes. Infielder was named the Big Ten Player of the Week. So, you know, we're developing. There's some new names that are starting to step up there. And, you know, this is it's a good start to the season. I mean, this is, as I said in my hot take at the beginning, you know, we have basketball and wrestling too with what they did, but baseball, this is a great start right now. And I do think that the RPI is probably a little bit inflated right now, but it's also still what it is. You know, I mean, I'm not apologizing for it either. And that's a good start for us to have. To be 10-4 right now, and we've won some good games. And tonight, this is a big one too. It's the thing that killed us, destroyed us last year. Were all these in midweek games, and to go out there and get a win at Wichita State tonight, that's awesome.
Yep, agreed. All right. Other baseball talk here at all? Boomer, Rob, you have anything else you want to add here? I mean, I do think that we got a long ways to go, but. Could be a fun season, and hopefully we get some good weather going forward so that Haymarket Park crowd fills up.
Well, I'm just hoping that the ESPN Plus announcers are able to get the name of Nebraska cities correct, at least faster than I could. It is pronounced La Vista, Nebraska, not La Vista.
What do you say tonight?
Nebraska. La Vista.
La
Yeah.
Vista.
La
Yeah,
Vista.
the guy on ESPN Plus, if anyone was able to listen, was doing a solo broadcast. It was just him, and I mean, he did it about as well as he could. If he was only calling it by himself, he sure didn't have a spotter or someone on his shoulder telling him how to pronounce cities. But yeah, it was. It was.
Luckily, nobody was from Papillion or Norfolk.
And fortunately, you know, and Abby here, she's talking about the softball team here, and yes, she is correct. Yeah, they have a tough schedule. You know, they're not as bad as their record would indicate.
Yeah.
I would like to say though that on behalf of the University of Northern Colorado Bears, go Bears.
Yeah, so Northern Colorado did win today, and that's a late scheduled game they had.
It was.
I think it only
they play
came
again
out
on Thursday too. So
and I mean, I can't overstate how just devastating for the team it was to be 3 innings into the season and have Jordy Ball go down for the year like that. I'm not making excuses, and this team, there's still a lot of games ahead of it, and it can get better and all those things. But talk about a devastating, way to kick off the season, which had so much excitement coming into it. I mean, they've added seats to that stadium, to Bullen Stadium there, just for this season and obviously for down the road. But I mean, that's a rough way to go. So it even says it all the more is that to support this team and to Husker Nation, this team could use that support more than anything, to have a tough start like that. So those seats have been, put up and built. Let's fill them. I mean, let's fill them for this season and let's see the softball team get some more wins.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys. You want to touch on football?
Yeah,
Ready?
let's do it.
Let's throw on our scarlet-colored glasses and talk all things Nebraska football. And Boomer, I think what we wanted to talk about a little bit is Nick Saban, which I don't know if this is exactly Nebraska football, but he made some news today with an interesting comment about NIL and how the landscape of college football has changed. And you want to kind of recap that and give us your thoughts?
Yeah, essentially, Congress doesn't have any real issues to deal with in American politics. So they had a hearing today in regards to, they called it an NIL hearing, but it was more just about just the state of college football in general. And, Saban was there talking about it. And, we joked earlier on about his wife. He referenced his wife saying that, players nowadays only care about money and aren't interested in, bettering themselves and things like that, which is, funny coming from a guy who's, left Michigan State for LSU, then to the NFL, then back to Alabama. And, I think, didn't he have something in his contract where he always had to be the highest paid coach in college sports?
He sure was.
I think he did, if I remember right. He always had to make at least $1 more than any other coach in college football. But that
no ego there at all, right, Boomer?
Right, exactly. Yeah. So, that notwithstanding, he was commenting on that, and kind of the state of football right now. And he did have a few good points in terms of NIL. Does seem to be, well, it is lawless. We know that. We've said it before. It's kind of the Wild West, and it is out of control. His whole pitch was that there needs to be some form of revenue sharing in college football. He says they shouldn't be considered employees. And there were lots of people and senators that seemed to be, offended by the idea of calling them employees. And I hope they didn't listen to Fred's, opening statement that we had when he said the players came to work every day with a professional mindset. I mean, be careful there, guys. So, but yeah, and that's kind of the talk. The NCAA, or the schools seem to be, pushing for Congress to do something, quote unquote, do something with all this. And make it so, pass some sort of law that somehow regulates all of this. I don't know what they can do, but they'll certainly try to do something, I think. And it is something that does probably need some sort of guidance or rails. And we chatted a little bit about this in our text thread. I don't know how you can regulate NIL realistically unless you're calling players employees or having some sort of collective bargaining thing. Because the way the courts have been deciding lately, if these kids aren't contracted employees, you don't have them under some sort of contract or agreements, what right do you have to tell them they can't do X, Y, or Z with their name? know, you see it with like the NFL, you know, NFL players can go endorse things like Skittles or things like that, but they limit, you know, they can't go endorse like casinos and things like that. If my memory serves me correctly, there's products they can't endorse. There's things they can't do. I think that's, you know, that's kind of where college football is just kind of in that gray area. It's tough, you know, what, you know, they want to put limits on NIL, but how do you do that without calling them employees? How do you revenue share without killing, you know, other sports?
Let me ask you this, Boomer, and then I'll open it up to Robert or Honky. I totally understand that argument of that you, I mean, to have a revenue sharing system, you need some sort of systematic way to handle the players, employees, or wherever you want to call them. But wouldn't you also need, similar to the NFL, right? You need some sort of actually like central organizing body that actually governs itself appropriately, opposed to how the NCAA does it today, right? I mean, like you'd need all 130 teams or 64 teams or whatever number you end up choosing that teams that want to buy in and actually do this to agree to all the same terms. It's not just the players agreeing to terms. It'd be each school had to agree to the same terms. Or is that fair to say?
Yeah, I'll just pitch in on this. And that was one of the things that Saban did mention, is that he wants this sort of revenue sharing and he wants it equal across the board. He did bring up, you know, points on this. It's just, you know, with NIL as it currently is, it throws everything completely out of whack between schools. That, you know, some schools have good NIL setups where they have big money boosters that can,
like Nebraska,
fund those things. Yeah, like Nebraska would be one. And I'm sure Alabama, well, I mean, hell, they had big money boosters before NIL was a thing. So, but beside the point.
They've had practice.
Yes, they've had a lot of practice on this. Yeah. So, but there's lots of programs that don't have this luxury. And it's hard to say you're competing in anywhere remotely the same sort of field if this is so egregiously out of whack on this. I mean, college sports has always had that imbalance. Don't get me wrong, and I've complained about that many times. And that's one of the things that Saban said today in his hearing, is that he wants us to be revenue sharing, and it should be equal across, you know, all the schools, all the players get the same amount of whatever. However you figure that out.
And that's going
to be the challenge, because we've seen that already when it comes to the playoff system as well. You know, the Big Ten and the SEC is already flexing muscle around it.
Taking we should
get a bigger share of this pot than you guys do. How do you split that around among players? You know, this is going to be fun to figure out.
So Honky, I mean, I think it would have been hilarious if Saban would have said today, like, Alabama's had the infrastructure for NIL in place for 4 decades, or whatever, you know. But I mean, what do you think about what Saban said, and what's a realistic expectation on how this like changes at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big quotes that came out today when he's talking about his wife Terry, he goes, why are we doing this now? She told him the players now only care about how much money they are making. I think that ends up getting the headlines instead of probably a lot of the discussion he had, because quite honestly, I don't want to hear it from Saban. I really don't. A coach that, when you go back 27 years ago, when Coach Osborne's retiring, the guy's making like $250,000. There's one coach at that time, I think it was Philip Fulmer was the first coach. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he was the first coach to make $1 million. So that's 97, 98, that time frame. And here we are 27 years later, and Nick Saban's making $11.7 million when he leaves. And as Boomer's point there, he left Michigan State to go to LSU, leave to go there to have a better shot to make a bigger dollar, right? He's sitting next to Ted Cruz today. Ted Cruz is from Texas. A couple of years ago, the rumors of Saban going to Texas, I'm sure that added an extra $1 or $2 to his contract. He played it right, and to sit there and I'm not the guy arguing we need to be paying players more and more. It's not that, but like when I get and so Skip and I will differ on some things, but Skip was very, very adamant today about saying kind of essentially screw you, Saban. I mean, you profited as much as anybody from this, and now you're going to sit there and come out after the fact and tell us how we have to think we need more equality throughout all this. So there's inequities.
Really? You get to pay the same? Is that maybe what we should do?
Yeah. Do you think there's some built-in inequities? Are you kidding me? I mean, so from the SEC, we've got inequities. Okay, yeah. I mean, how many times do we fight just to try to get a 9th, conference game scheduled, and they wouldn't do it? So, look, I don't have any answers. We had Coach Osborne on this show 2 years ago, and he talked about it. I'll listen to that guy. before I listen to Saban any day about this. When Coach Osborne talked about it and said that this is chaos and the NCAA kicked the can down the road for years, and this is what you ended up with. And we have unrestricted free agency, and this is it is absolutely everything that he said it was going to be, and we're kind of paying for it right now because this just doesn't make sense. When Trev Alberts, there's a great interview. If you didn't watch it last week, he was on with Husker Online with Sipple and Callahan. And Alberts, he talked about how this schedule right now is insane for football coaches. It never ends. You never stop recruiting your team. When the offseason goes on, you're constantly re-recruiting them because they can leave at any time. We've taken away all the penalties of leaving. And now I don't even know what the latest rule is. I know obviously you can transfer once, but now is there a limitless transfer rule? Has that been put in place? Or it's just insane. And the coaches are well paid. They'll do fine. The coaches are going to do fine, but at the end of the day, man, I also wouldn't want to be a coach right now, at least compared to maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago when you could make a ton of money and not have to constantly be recruiting your team all the time.
Yep, it's true.
And I think we've seen that from some
thoughts?
coaches that just don't want to do this anymore. I mean, Chip Kelly went from being a head coach at UCLA to just happy being a position coach. So this is not something he has to deal with. And we've seen other coaches just leave NCAA head coaching gigs for just random jobs in the NFL where they don't have to deal with the sort of stuff.
Offensive coordinator and whatnot. Yeah. Rob, anything?
I'm sorry. I didn't realize I was being asked. Spring ball is only 7 weeks away.
Spring game.
Spring games. Sorry, man. I'm stuck between
spring ball is only like 2 weeks away.
Spring game is only. Well, let's see here.
For our listeners, Honky,
1, 2, 3,
do you want
4, 5, 6 weeks?
Yeah. And there's no spring game.
Run down the schedule since everybody has some clarity on actually when spring ball starts.
Well, spring ball starts, and I think it's 2 or next week. Is it? Oh, geez, I'm
like 10 days.
I don't have it.
I think it is next week.
I don't have it in front of me either. This is spring break right now this week on campus. So I think it's in a week or week and a half. 12 days because I was seeing there's one of the 24/7 or somebody did they're doing a countdown of players to spring ball like you would do during a regular season. God, I love Nebraska media. There's never a shortage of things to talk about, right? So let's do a countdown to spring ball. By the way, in Minnesota, just today, PJ Fleck, they just announced they're not having a spring game again. So seems stupid. Perfect opportunity to show off your program, but they are choosing not to do that, I guess. But honestly, everything that we've talked about for the last hour up to this point, basketball and baseball, it's been so refreshing because it literally has taken all the attention off of football for every second for at least a couple of months now. They've gotten to at least go through mat drills. And they release a really cool video every once in a while, chasing series. That's awesome. Go on to YouTube, watch Chasing. It's a
Chasing
great
3, isn't it?
Chasing 3. It's a great series that they're doing, but I just love that some of the attention's off of that. Some of the focus is off Husker football for just a few weeks, and let's put it onto other sports and not just the men's sports. Like we said, we talked about what Amy Williams' crew was doing too. I think that's a good thing right now for football. Give them a little bit of breathing room, and we'll start talking about them, ad nauseum here in a couple of weeks as we get into spring ball.
Yep, absolutely. All right, guys, are we ready for some parting shots?
Yeah, let's do it.
Excellent. Let's get to there. We go. All right. Let's go with Rob first.
Always put me on the spot there, Dave.
No, I usually take you last, man. Jeez.
Oh, yeah, I guess that's true. Well, I would just like to thank everybody for my mellow attitude this evening. I'm kind of feeling a little bit of a soreness from walking something on an average of 15,000 steps a day over the last couple of days.
Congratulations, Rob.
I'm a little bit. Thanks for tolerating me tonight.
We always tolerate you, Rob. It's our job, really. We love you, buddy. Boomer.
All right. Well, first off, AFL football started this last week. I don't know if anyone had a chance to watch, but don't worry, St. Kilda doesn't play till this weekend. They're playing the Geelong Cats, and since half the team is injured, we're going to get smoked. But that's beside the point. But I also wanted to give a shout out to Nebraska and Iowa women's basketball for the game they had this last weekend. it was a great game, and God, Nebraska had that towards the end of the game. I wish they could have held on, but outside of that, it was just the viewership of that was incredible. I think they averaged just a little over 3 million viewers on CBS, and it peaked with over almost 4.5 million viewers in overtime.
Yeah.
That's one of the most watched college basketball games, of all time. And it, in comparison, Dave, I mean, Duke, North Carolina. I know you're a big UNC fan.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone's ever picked up on that. That averaged about just a little over 3 million viewers. People say, "Oh, that was on ESPN, where the women's game was on CBS." Well, the women's game was also at 11 a.m. on a Sunday, after daylight savings time.
Yeah.
I mean, that shows you that
half
there is
the
an
country
interest in
it was
sports.
9 or 10 a.m.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, people in California probably didn't even know what day it was. They thought it was February when that game was kicking on. It was tipping off. So, just there is a demand for women's sports out there. People will watch it. We've said it many times on here how volleyball needs to get better publicity. Women's basketball can do the same thing. The Caitlin Clark effect. Yeah, there's some truth to that, but. Yeah, you get a fun game with like Iowa and Nebraska playing each other, teams that don't particularly like each other, and fan bases that don't, and a fun game. People will watch that. And I hope, TV execs are paying attention to this. There's a lot.
It has to have been a really nice bump for Amy Williams from a recruiting standpoint to have these huge national games. I mean, like, if the outcome of Caitlin Clark is that the Big Ten gets better at women's basketball because the recruiting's gotten better, because everybody's like, hey, you guys are on TV a lot, and like next year USC has got the next Caitlin Clark and Juju Watkins. I mean, she's scoring like 28 points a game. So
NU gets Britt Prince, and then just Iowa today got a 5-star recruit. Deal was her last name. So to your point there, Dave, I mean, that's these teams are benefiting too from that exposure. And I mean, Abby's been watching here, and we've had conversations with Abby in the past about this. It's like, televise this stuff if you want. And we've said that it's not just women's sports. We've said it about baseball too. If you want to grow a sport, it's really hard to do it on Peacock 3. I mean, it just is. And so getting it, and then we shouldn't be shocked too when you actually do put women's basketball on CBS and you have good storylines because people are starting to watch it and starting to pay attention to it, that you get 4.4 million people watching it, and it beats anything in the NBA or any men's sports that day. So or any men's basketball that day. And so people will watch it. 90,000 will come out and watch a volleyball game. It's a crazy thing. So
real quick too, in case anybody, I'll circle back a little bit back to baseball. If anyone's questioning this team and just like strength of schedule and wondering how good they could be, South Alabama, a team that they just took 2 or 3 from this last weekend, just went down and beat Mississippi State tonight. So
nice.
Nice.
Right.
Yeah, there you go. So
that's a hell of a facility down there.
And Mississippi State is, always just a solid baseball program overall. And South Alabama went in there and just went out there and beat them 8-6. And we just took 2 out of 3 from them. So,
all right.
If you want to doubt anything about this baseball team, maybe that.
Yep. All right, Rob. Good stuff. All right, Honky, get us out of here.
All right. Well, Boomer kind of got me going on some attendance numbers there, and thought I'd show this. Was on social media today. Highest total attendance in Big Ten's men's basketball nationally. 5 schools are in the top 12 in total attendance. Indiana there was number 6 at 296,000. There's NU number 8 nationally, 277,000. And then Illinois, Sparty, and Wisconsin go 10, 11, 12. But that's another great stat there in the back pocket for Fred. We talk about after this offseason and looking forward to next season, what does Fred have to look forward to? You've got NIL keeping, I think, some of this team together, and we're going to have a number of guys hopefully coming back from it. And then what Husker Nation has done right there, having this kind of attendance, that's been great. The other thing I wanted to show was college football's most valuable programs. Fox posted this here today, and they're at number 12 at 51 million is Nebraska. And just to kind of give some idea here, the difference between number 8, which is A&M, they're 55 million and we're 51. We're tied with Auburn and Florida pretty much kind of at 11, 12, 13. But Nebraska, according to this graphic at least, we are the number 2 most valuable program in the Big Ten. You have to go down to, Wisconsin's number 15 at 48 million. 47 million is Penn State. I guess 48 million is also Oregon for what it's worth. They're number 16.
Mhm.
Washington's number 19, 45 million. Minnesota's tied with them. Ohio State's at 43 million. So I'm curious what they're saying is value, or how they estimated
makes no
annual
Well,
value.
it was efficiency rankings with the money, how they're using it. So.
It says the
That's the problem.
estimated annual value according to Go banking rates. So whatever. But Ohio State and Iowa are tied at 43 million down there. But it just again shows Nebraska the value of this program, even years after our glory years and all that. It's still up there. Husker Nation is strong. Keep showing up. Keep watching us. Again, we've had another great episode of a lot of fans that watching us live. We love that. We love the interaction with you. So keep watching live. Keep listening the next day on the podcast if that's how you get us. But we appreciate you, Redcasters. And let's get some wins here this weekend and next. GBR.
Absolutely. All right, guys, great stuff. Enjoyed the show. Anticipate to do a show next week, sometime after we find out where we're going on Selection Sunday. That's fun to say. Hey, guys.
Right.
But for now, let's call that another Go Big Redcast.
Go Big Red.
A Herd at Sports Network production.